So as we said, my name's Joe. I'm from the neuro team of the physio department. So we look at any patients who have got a central nervous system abnormality, so disease or something occupying their brain, that we can help rehab them really, so get them back to some level of fitness or help them through a pathway of the disease. And one aspect of our service is Parkinson's, and we've taken a really good we've taken a really good look at Parkinson's in the past year or so to really try and move things forward with a recent sort of evidence that's come out from different areas of the world. There we go. Do you want to swap it over?
No, I'll just stay with.
So different areas of the world really. So if we go and have a look, we'll look what we're going to go through. So we're going to have a look at what is Parkinson's disease as a format. I know some of you will be familiar with that, but we'll just go into a bit more detail. How many we're seeing on Guernsey, and actually positively what we're seeing on Guernsey. Benefits of the group, why we run the group in certain ways we do for the sort of patients that are experiencing the symptoms they do. Who it affects in terms of actually what we're doing, and also why are we doing and the outcomes that we'll have overall with these patients, and looking at some of the data we collect during it to prove the worth of the service really, because it's a large investment of time and money from HSC and Guernsey Parkinson's Society that fund the room. So we'll round it up. So we first look at Parkinson's disease as a reason. So there's lots of type of Parkinsonisms for all different reasons. So we can look at Parkinson's disease as a specific. So Parkinson's disease is specific as a central nervous system problem. Affects one part of the brain, the basal ganglia, which sits slightly deeper in the brain matter, which is important in our movement patterns for the regulation of on and off really, or the reduction of activity. Parkinson's disease people end up with dopamine cells dying, and that therefore interrupts the workings of the pathways within the basal ganglia, and means people end up with different sorts of symptoms. So idiopathic means we don't really know why it's caused, and that's a real frustration for all of us as medics, as therapists, and certainly as patients, because we'd like nothing more than to have a solution for it, but we really need to make sure we can support these patients as we are. So there's three main symptoms really. There are more, like with every disease or pathology, but one that we really see is that typical patients with the tremor, yeah? So the shaking of the arm, the hand, the lips, and patients find this part really frustrating. So we call this tremor, or an involuntary shake of the body part. Yeah? The other one's bradykinesia, and some patients will know this is freezing or getting stuck, and that again for patients is incredibly frustrating because they just want to get to the end goal. They want to get through that doorway. They want to get to answer that telephone before it hangs up. They want to be able to get from the coffee shop to the bus stop so they can actually catch the bus and not have to wait an extra hour. Yeah? So that's one of the really interesting parts. And then rigidity as well, so that's stiffness of muscles. It's slightly different to tone in its most normal sense, but it does cause some of those movements to become more effortful, more challenging, and actually the movements don't make it so easy, and actually overall things become much more effortful for day-to-day living. And through some therapies we can really help patients overcome some of these aspects. So the incidence of Parkinson's disease, we don't have much data in Guernsey, but we do have some data from the UK. So there's about 160 people per 100,000, so a fairly significant amount. And then the incidence every year, we're looking about 15 to 20 people diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. So we think of Guernsey, we're probably down the latter end of that at 67,000 people. So we're looking at about 15 diagnoses a year as a rough guide. We don't have data for it, but roughly. And also, 2% of people over the age of 80 will have Parkinson's disease. And it's quite interesting, I think, that one, because is it just not picked up when they're younger? I think could be one of the thoughts. But then also, 1 in 7 cases will be under the age of 60. So these patient groups are often a group of patients who are really active, who love playing sport, who love being active with children, have grandchildren. Lots of our patients with Parkinson's are working. They've got hobbies that really need to be active and physical, and we need to help our patients keep in those activities. So Like I said, data in Guernsey is quite difficult, but we took some of our data from our service as GTG on our system, and we looked at having the referrals we see in Guernsey. So new patients, how many contacts of patients with Parkinson's disease do we see? So it's got increasingly more, which from my aspect is positive, because I think that actually we're giving more information to the wider MDT, the wider healthcare group, saying, look guys, we're doing this service, we can really help these patients. I don't know if it's because we're seeing actually more, but 2018 we saw 41, then 2019 we nearly saw 60, and then even in the first half of this year, with COVID, we saw 33. So there's quite a steady increase of new referrals coming through. And the reasons for it, we don't know. It needs to be looked into more, and probably some of our data needs putting with Dr. Matthews, but it's positive, I think, in a way that people are knowing we've got this service for patients with Parkinson's disease. Treatment options. Like I said, it's idiopathic, so that makes treatment options quite difficult because we can never eradicate it. We can't go in and say, right, we're going to give you X, Y, and Z, and you're going to overcome your symptoms. Yeah? That makes sense? So the chest infection, we can give you antibiotics, 14 days, you're getting better. Parkinson's disease, we're trying to manage the symptoms and slow down the effects. The medication can be given. There's a whole array of medication. Most of them are dopamine-acting drugs, so they help relieve some of the symptoms. And you'll hear about these patients having on-off periods. And that's a real thing that the medics look into, along with the specialist nurses, to try and help the time of Parkinson's medication being given. The surgical option, so you'll see some people having DBSs, so deep brain stimulators. So they put electrodes into the area of where these excitation needs to be from the dopamine that we can no longer have, or the reason why we have dopamine, they can do it through electrical currents. And again, that's a symptom-based relief. There's a new thing coming out for other treatments from electrical currents perspective, but they're the ones we're seeing in Guernsey. And then actually therapies that can be involved. The whole array of speech and language therapy, dietitians, pharmacists, occupational therapists, and again, obviously physio, which we're looking at today. So there's a whole array of a team that needs to look after these patients and really make sure we're moving forward. And other therapies that get involved as well, looking at some of the more community-based ones. So the structure of Parkinson's group, so we're looking at a finite patient group that we're having. So we look at patients who are the earlier stage of Parkinson's, and we'll have a look at inclusion criteria in a minute. But this isn't for the whole spectrum of Parkinson's patients. Like the title was, early stage Parkinson's disease is where we're looking at, because actually we know if we give early intervention, if we give upstream treatment, rather proactive treatment, we can really save frustration for patients, time for the healthcare system, and also give patients a really good quality of life if we can go upstream rather than waiting to catch them down in the net at the bottom. Yeah, that's the important bit. So program of the structure is a pre-assessment, which is one-to-one, so that would be either be that would be one of the physiotherapists and the patient, and that would be the real assessment of which pathway you're taking. You're going for the group to try and go there, or do we need more specific one-to-one and then to the group, or do we need more specific one-to-one overall? Collection of data, so we collect a whole array of data which we'll have a look at in a minute. So we really want to prove that our service is actually giving patients a real benefit to what we're doing, rather than just having some subjective, yep, I feel better after it. So it's a 10-week program, and through that you end up with 16 sessions of physical exercise. Week one, first session, and the last session, like I say, data collection. And then in the middle week, because 10 weeks is quite a long time, we try and get some of the other healthcare professionals in. So we've had speech and language, dietitians, Dr. Matthew. We've had those guys come in because once we get to week 5, the group's sort of knitted together. And those questions that they go into clinic, and it's difficult because it's a quick clinic, we really want them to be able to sit down and say, actually, have a chat about it, and the real informal environment we have when the other clinicians come, and they can ask those questions that they sometimes might feel a bit silly doing. And patients have really found that useful because they can have that open and honest conversation about the whole disease, not just looking at them in isolation. 2 education sessions, sorry. And the room, so the structure program, the room, we're really, really fortunate. We're funded by Guernsey Parkinson's Society for the room rent, which is a huge benefit to us because we do it off-site, so we don't do it on the hospital. There's a number of reasons, and we sat down as a team and worked out why do we want to do it off-site or why do we want to do it in the hospital. One of the reasons we thought of doing it off-site is less clinical, and actually these patients, like I said earlier, early stage, mid-stage patients who are active, who are going out, who are playing sports, who are out swimming, who are out sailing, who are out running, and actually for them to come to a hospital twice a week, it's not really the environment they want to be in. More practical things, parking, real chores to get here. And also up at Beausejour we've got an amazing room there, air-conned room, and they've got then the social environment afterwards. And as I'll talk about, that we then got a transition after the group for them to go on to. And about 10 to 20 patients in each cohort. So a fair sized group of people. So, inclusion criteria. I talked a little bit about that. So it's the early to moderate stage patients. So there's a scale, the BARC scale, which is 1 to 4 stages, the 6 stages in the whole thing. But we're looking at those patients who are independently mobile. They can walk without an aid most of the time. They're medically fit for aerobic and resistance activities. You'll see some of the exercises that we filmed, and they're quite intense actually. Obviously they consent, we don't bring them under duress. Some of them might, obviously. Afterwards they're different. They've also got goals. People come to us and say, you know what, I really want to get better at this. And that's really positive because we can then tailor programs, we can then tailor the course to that individual, although it's within the group setting at the same time. Obviously initial assessment to make sure that everything's okay. And then the low falls risk. So these patients aren't necessarily having falls. Like I say, we're upstream treatment, we're really getting in there early to prevent stuff from happening and also slow things down a little bit. That's what the evidence is saying. Or they've got a saving reaction. There's some tests that we do on patients to see that. So I talked a little bit about what we've got going on. So the evidence behind it is there's a really good evidence coming from America a few years back, which was the Parkinson's, I forgot the name of it now. Wellbeing. Thanks, Adam. Parkinson's wellbeing, and then that got taken forward by some of the Australian team to look at Parkinson's Warrior program. So some of our team have trained in the Parkinson's Warrior. We don't run a Parkinson's, we have a license to run Parkinson's Warrior, but we take some of the aspects of it and incorporate it in our group going forward. So these are sort of the 7 principles of the Parkinson's Warrior program for these patients, and they're all sort of quite wordy, aren't they? And actually when we look at it from a clinician's perspective, we're really looking at 3 main parts of it, of what we're really wanting to do. So neuroprotection. So that's the use it or lose it, yeah? So if we really are going to push you at the level of what you're working at the moment, you're going to keep those synaptic junctions working, you're going to keep that activity going, you're going to keep working hard to make sure that if you're using those areas, you're then really promoting the maintenance of those pathways to those muscles, to those nerves, to those actions. Restoration. So again, as people go through the pathways, as things become more difficult or they're using things less, what happens is some of the transmission will start to slow down a little bit, which is understandable. But actually through this pathway, we can catch that. And that's what I'm saying with the upstream treatment. It's not that we're catching them at day 1, where we'd like to be, but we are catching them when they've got change available. And that comes on to the third. So neuroplasticity. Every neurophysio's favourite word, neuroplasticity. So that's the ability for the brain to change. So it's for new synapses to occur, for neurons to attach, and it's to really make things laid down in the brain for people then to be able to use them in day-to-day activity. And that's where neuroplasticity and sort of the restoration are the same aspect almost, but are slightly different. So we'll have a quick look. So these exercises are very much involved. So when we look at the sort of 7 aspects of, sorry, can we go? Sorry.
Next one.
Back one.
Oh, back one.
So if we look at the 7 aspects, they need to be that high effort. So they're going to be effortful for patients. They need to be specific to some of the activities. So we talked earlier about the 3 main symptoms of Parkinson's. So the tremor, the stiffness, and the slowness, the bradykinesia. Yeah? So you look at some of these movements, they're involving lots of aspects of interlimb movement, so left and right, up and down, upper limb and lower limb activity, lots of truncal activity, but also verbalization. And this is one thing that patients with Parkinson's really feel, is their voice gets slower, but also gets quieter. And we had a patient last year who was really frustrated because he was watching his grandson play football, and his grandson could never hear him, even though he's going every week to help support his grandson, but couldn't. And this was something that actually we really incorporated well, and you'll see from the videos in a minute, that bringing that verbal aspect of being able to do two things at the same time, and then sometimes a cognitive aspect as well later in the weeks as the exercises get slightly harder throughout. Again, the frequency is important, a bit like any exercise prescription. There needs to be a frequency and a good dose, and that's why 10 weeks, quite a long time, quite an investment from patients and from staff. But we really see, and when we look at the data, we really see that these are carried over and that way. And also it's quite a fun session, all the physios love doing it, we work well as a team, and the patients are really sort of positive afterwards and feel that they've had an enjoyable time, and it's not like just trudging through exercises. So have a look at some of the exercises. We've got quite a few, thanks to Sam and Adam at the back. They, consent was obviously gained, but again, we'll see.
Push steps. Forwards, back, forwards, back, forwards, back, and switch. Forwards, back, forwards, back, forwards, back. Box step. Right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. And here we go. Forwards, back, forwards, back, forwards, and back, forwards, and back. Helicopter partner clap. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Stop and squat. Stop! Back! Stop! Back! Stop! Back! Stop! Back! Stop! Back! Stop! Back! Saturday Night Fever. 1, down. 2, down. 3, down. 4, down. 007. Bang! 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 Grapevine. In front, step, behind, step. In front, step, behind, step. In front, step, behind, step. In front, step.
So you see, again, really sort of finely balanced exercise for patients to be doing. And they don't all start at this level, as you understand, but they do progress to this. One that we use at the end, so one that we haven't videoed, we get a lot of patients boxing, so there's pads and gloves. And it's a really interesting, really, because there's a mix of ladies and gentlemen in the group. Some ladies who are slightly more dainty in that aspect, but they actually love it. They're really getting involved. So actually we're getting that ballistic boxing, the real engagement of hand-eye coordination, but we're also getting that powerful cardiovascular exertion when we're boxing. I don't know if anyone has ever tried boxing, but it's really effortful. You really get a good workout from it, yeah? We haven't videoed that one, but the last one is a bit of a finale that we do.
Can.
So I know and again, it's fun. It's really fun for patients, but there's a lot of thought process going into the back of these exercises from the clinicians of really working out what are they having to do to be part of that. They're having to be involved with another person. There's lots of on-off activity. There's lots of changing of sides. There's lots of being involved with music. And then again, the fast one at the end, which often goes to similar situations.
Can.
So yeah, with the funny side aside really, there is so much activity from different motions, from different planes of movement that are going into these exercises for patients who find sometimes going forward difficult, and actually they're getting so much exposure in this environment to be able to move forward. We'll have a look at the data then. So a bit more of the sort of, not interesting, so the reason why we're doing it, and actually the reason why we're continuing to do this, the reason why we're still asking Parkinson's Society to fund us to do this, to make sure that we can move forward and make sure we're seeing these patients. And likewise, we'll talk at the end of what we've changed to make sure that things are moving forward. So we've got 5 times sit to stand. It's one of the outcome measures we use. So a patient will sit on a chair, arms across their chest, and they'll stand up 5 times. And it's a really good evidence base for some of the activities of the lower limb, how strong they are. Some of the geriatric physios will use it for their patients to see the ability. But for our Parkinson's patients, again, it's that change of direction, going from an agonist to an antagonist, going from a down to an up, really looking at it. So the data showed, we'll have a look at seconds and that sort of thing. Have a look at going from data and going from seconds. So we looked at our time pre and post. So a slight difference when you look at the data in isolation, but then we can look at it, and actually patients improved by almost 25% quicker. So they dropped their period by 25%. So that's a huge improvement when you look at it from a percentage perspective. Yeah. Timed up and go. So this one, stand up, walk 3 meters, turn around, come sit back down. Picking up the telephone when it's ringing, those sorts of activities. So it's quite comparable, this one a bit more. And again, this was one that we did pre and post. So 8.5 to 6.5 seconds. 2 seconds difference, again, is looking at 26% change in the data. 26% faster, or 26% lost from the original time. Which again is fairly significant practice. And we've got to remember that this data is collected after 10 weeks. Patients we expect will then keep improving to a certain extent, we're expecting, because they're then going to have to do more activity at home, and then we'll go on to what we do further. And one of the really powerful ones, I think we use lots as physios, is a 10-meter walk. So patients walk 10 meters end to end. We count their steps and the time they take it in. So it's used in all varieties of patient groups, from children, pediatrics, geriatrics, all those aspects. And we work out meters per second, so we can work out their velocity over ground. So again, went from 1.3 to 1.5 meters per second. We look at different speeds. So we look at them doing slowly, or we look at them doing their normal gait speed, so we ask them just to walk the 10 meters. And that improved by 20%. It was quite interesting, really. And then again, the fast ones, so they walk as fast as they can safely, improved by 13%. And that's sort of quite nice to look at percentages. 20% sounds really good. But then when we look at it, if you put it in comparison to somewhere in Guernsey, in practice, if you look at someone at the ice cream shop near the sailing club, walking to the town terminus, it would have taken them 13 minutes. Now it takes them 10 minutes. Yeah? So it's quite an interesting change for someone being able to get that bus, not get that bus. Yes, there's going to be other things involved, steps, fatigue, that sort of thing. But just as a side, that's a 3-minute change in someone's walking speed of a distance like that. Yeah. The thing that we can't measure, which is difficult, is someone's perception of exercise necessarily during that time when we did these tests, which is something we looked at. So going on to patient feedback, patients really enjoyed the class, as you can you guys have enjoyed watching the class, let alone doing it. So 78% of patients agreed or strongly agreed it's improved their quality of life. So that's a fairly powerful number. That they felt that actually they ended up with a better quality of life after doing 16 exercise sessions. And also, they agreed they were able to challenge themselves more at home. And that's an interesting one, because we've got just over half those patients being able to do that, which is really important, because then they're going to have some continuation of their progress or maintenance of what they've achieved. It's quite interesting, because we looked at that and said, what's happened to the other half of the patients? We need to make sure they're really well supported going forward. So what we looked at going forward was after the exercise program, we do the 10 weeks of one or sort of group sessions. We've then developed a situation where we take patients then into the gym at Beausejour. And that's one of the reasons why we like to use Beausejour, because then they know the environment, they've met some of the people up there, they can then be transitioned. So Adam takes patients up there afterwards and develops a program for them. They go at the same time as LifeFit. So again, they're around clinicians or therapists and gym technicians around there that can help them with some of the aspects. But they've also learnt the exercises they can do in a separate room. And we've had a really, really good take-up of that. And then patients have really carried it on. We've had a blip with COVID and people have almost got out the rhythm of doing it. But from when we looked at our first group, 2018-2019, patients have really carried on through. And it was interesting from our perspective, we didn't get that many patients returning. We had the odd patient call up and say, hey, could we have a look at our gym program? Could we change some bits with it? And it was good, because we could go up, problem solve, troubleshoot, and the patient could then carry on making the progress or maintaining their functional ability. Frequency of the group was looking at how many groups we can run, because sometimes getting that many patients is difficult. So that's one of the reasons why we're really keen to shout about what we're doing, so patients can come through the group and actually we can get people on board quicker. Our outcome measures, we haven't looked at all of them. We take about 15 outcome measures when we do it, some of which we've changed. So for example, we use the functional gait. We found there's a huge ceiling effect, so that patients got to 30 out of 30 really quickly. So we've changed that to one of the other outcome measures. And also, one thing that we talked about, the 10-metre walk, was although we've improved it, it's only over 10 metres, so we don't really know someone's physical activity, we don't know their VO2 max. So we've incorporated one of the pulmonary rehab outcome measures, which is a shuttle run. So what you do is you go from one end to one end and you keep going until you can't do any more, and it gets quicker and quicker, a bit like a leap test. So for subsequent groups, we've started doing that. And that will hopefully give us really good evidence to why we're doing things. And also look at some of the exercises we're changing to look at doing some more cardiovascular based situations as well. And again, we ran the support the patients to the gym and aid them in self-management, because patients are so busy, they don't want to be coming to a class all the time, but they do need a really good kickstart and the skills to be able to do it. Because otherwise, where do they start? And it's really a sort of open window. What do they start with? Well, how do we help them get into it? And I think a huge thank you goes out to the Guernsey Parkinson's Society for supporting us with the funding of the room up at Beausejour, and it makes the environment for this group much more enjoyable. So thank you for that, and also thanks to the team, thanks to Adam and Sam for being such good sports, but also they've really looked at developing the programme forward over the past few months and put a lot of effort and time into developing it.